In the last webinar, Dutch textile designer Laura Luctman and Japanese kurume kasuri artisan Kyozo Shimogawa explored what role kurume kasuri played in contemporary design. This time, there will be a discussion on a specific collaboration project they could do together that will form the bridge between kasuri and Dutch lifestyle. Laura Luctman is a textile and surface designer and the creative mind behind Studio Kuka in Rotterdam. Her work focuses on experimental color and material research. Through groundbreaking approaches to textile, color, production, and consumption, she wants to change our perception and create opportunities for a conscious industry. One example is her project Living Color, where she dyes textiles with pigment-producing bacteria in order to search for a more sustainable alternative for polluting textile dyes, as well as creating a new natural aesthetic. There's another speaker joining us today, formerly trained as a graphic designer from the National Institute of Design in India. Ajita Slokhande is passionate about designing brand identities from a cross-cultural lens. Having lived and worked across India and France, he likes to combine his interest in digital culture with the craft of graphic design to create work that lies at the intersection of different cultures, time periods, and disciplines.
For me, it's super interesting to learn about new textile techniques. Or it's new for me, of course. Kasuri is not new. And to explore that technique in creating designs together. As you know, I'm a big lover of Japan in general and Japanese culture and Japanese design. And I think if we look at our history between the two countries, between the Netherlands and between Japan, we have a long business relationship of over 400 years. And it would be nice to, I think, to explore that history a bit, to see how the trading relationship between the two countries has influenced maybe design history, and to see how we can incorporate that in new designs or a new project.
日本とオランダの間にはですね、やっぱりすごく交流の歴史が、とても深いっていうのがまずやっぱ一つあります。日本のその江戸時代から、400年以上の交流の歴史が、日本とオランダにはあります。で、その中でもですね、やっぱ2016年に、日本とオランダの間では国交400年を記念して九州オランダプロジェクトというのが、行われました。これはオランダ大使館の主催で、行われたプロジェクトなんですけれども、その中で私もですね参加させていただき、オランダのデザイナーの方数名と、いろんな交流のプログラムを体験させていただいたりとか、あと2017年に、アムステルダム訪問して、いろいろな交流もさせていただき、久留米がすりについてですね、オランダで紹介するプレゼンテーションの場をですね、いただくことができました。また私が住む九州アイランドではですね、長崎というところにですね、出島という場所があって、その出島を通じて、オランダと交易されていたっていう記録が残っています。その出島を通してですね、その江戸時代に日本のいわゆるジャパンブルーと言われる天然の藍が、オランダに、数多く輸出され、オランダでものすごい、日本の藍染めが人気だったっていう、そういう記録が残っていたのを 読んだことがあります。そういったですね、歴史の、今までの歴史の流れを紐解いた場合にですね、やっぱり今後も日本とオランダのいろいろな交流をしていく中でですね、個人的にはやっぱそういう、オランダのデザイナーの方と、コラボ企画をするっていうのはですね、その歴史の流れから見てもすごく、自然なことだなと、僕はそういうふうに思いました。
As Shimogawa-san said, the width of the Kasuri fabric is only 38 centimeters because it was used in kimono fabrics traditionally. And of course, that's a very narrow width of fabric to use, but I think it would be great to use in some interior products like cushion covers or table runners, placemats, things like that. But we could also, of course, explore more innovative products that have not been made with this Kasuri fabrics before. Just about starting with a product, you know, it's, of course, we have to think about what products you can make with this fabric, but the product itself is not the starting point. I think the starting point is to see where the two countries, or where Shimogawa-san and I and Ashitash, we have some common ground that we want to explore, and to develop a concept around this collaboration and tell a great story of the tradition of Kasuri, but also how this tradition can live on in the future within design.
僕も基本的には同じように思います。先ほども言いましたように、やっぱりその歴史に対するそのリスペクトっていうですね、やっぱりその歴史にちゃんと敬意を払って、その上で、自分がその歴史の積み重ねの中に立っているっていうことをちゃんと、そこに感謝を持ちながら、やっぱり、いろいろものづくりを続けていくっていうことは、すごく僕もその職人としてすごく、心がけていることだし、これはやっぱりそのずっと代々教えられてきたものでもあるので、一番それを重要視してます。で、日本には、その風呂敷っていうものがあって、こう、包む文化があります。で、これはやっぱりその、感謝の気持ちだったりとかですね、そういう思いを包んで相手にその気持ちを伝えるっていう意味合いがあります。で、なんかそういったものが多分歴史的、文化的背景だなと思ってまして、それをなんか、現代風に再解釈することで、なんか新たな商品作りのコンセプトが見えてくるんじゃないかなと思っています。
So I think from a retail visual design perspective, what might be really beneficial is to identify and curate a set of patterns that are quintessential, that are very characteristic of Kurume Kasuri. One thing that is very iconic is the indigo blue that is used in Kurume Kasuri. So I think the best way to go about it might be to be playful in the application, to use it in applications that are not seen before, as Laura mentioned. Perhaps, I don't know, you could imagine footwear or sneakers using Kurume Kasuri in some way, or coasters, or maybe little duffel bags, any products that seem to be popular these days with the new generation, and see how you can apply this traditional craft on these items, maybe even iPhone cases. But I think what is important is that the pattern design in themselves should remain as close to the authentic traditional designs as possible in order to not dilute the identity of the craft. So, but at the same time, it will also help in sort of creating a cohesive image around the brand, because if we have too much of a variety in the patterns, then the public might not be able to connect the specific pattern to a Kurume Kasuri product. So if you have, say, a defined fixed set of colors, fixed set of patterns, then what that will enable is for the public to look at any product that uses Kurume Kasuri patterns from this fixed set and identify it as Kurume Kasuri. And another thing that might be very interesting is to see how we can open up the creation of these products by collaborating with other brands. Because these days you see a lot of a lot of collaborations happening between seemingly unexpected brands. Like you see museums collaborating with Uniqlo, or you see a brand like Marimekko collaborating with a sportswear brand like Adidas. And in these scenarios, both of the brands, they still manage to maintain their identity because of the fixed set of guidelines that they have about how to use their color palette, how to use their patterns and other brand assets. And in this way, they are able to increase their audience and reach out to a wider audience by combining their efforts. So I think if we keep this potential for collaboration and defining the set of patterns in mind, it might be a good way to go about it.
With the tradition and symbolism of traditional Kasuri in mind, maybe create new patterns that like capture the today's time in a contemporary way, but still, because of the color use and the use of the technique, it's still very recognizable as Kasuri, but maybe it becomes in that sense then less of a traditional fabric and more of a contemporary design. That also shows how Kasuri can in a way evolve without losing the original craft. That was the first thing I want to respond to. And the second was that looking for brands to collaborate with is a really good idea. I was also thinking about maybe, as you see in fashion, a lot of the times there are couture collections created just to show what to create. Yeah, you know what
just define the trends of the season, that this is what is
exactly, and also what you're creatively capable of, and then turning that couture design into a ready-to-wear design for a bit larger public. So I think that would be a good idea. Also, when I look at these design collaborations, one of the examples I come up with is Issey Miyake collaborating with United Nude, which is a Dutch shoe brand, or an international shoe brand based on architecture. So those are very interesting collaborations indeed. So
because the unexpectedness of these collaborations is what makes them remarkable and memorable in the eye of the people. About the comment on can we create new patterns based off of existing symbolism used in Kurume Kasuri? I think the great advantage that we have in Kurume Kasuri is the patterns are still very geometric and very abstract, which means that gives us certain liberty to arrange and rearrange them in ways so that they can reflect things from our daily life. Like perhaps I saw this one polka, very simple polka dotted, I think it's called snowflake pattern in Kurume Kasuri. I was thinking, could we modify those little polka dots to make them look like emojis, for example? And that instantly adds a very popular, quirky touch. And like from a distance, you might still see the iconic indigo blue with those white polka dots. But if you get closer, if we are able to somehow figure out the details of the pattern, then you might see that each of the polka dots is a little emoji. So the geometricness of it gives us some room to play and to incorporate things from today's life into this fabric.
そうですね。ですね。これが藍染めなんで天然のこれは半袖の解禁シャツなんですけど、柄はやっぱ日本のそういうトラディショナルパターン、そういう歴史的にこれなんて言うんだろう、日本語では吉祥文様って縁起のいい柄って言われているものなんですけども、それ昔からずっと作られてきた柄ではありますけども、やっぱりその時代時代の職人がやっぱり自分なりの解釈でその柄の構図なんかまた再構築して作っていっているっていう典型的なパターンですね。例えばなんていうんですかね、クラシックでああいうモーツァルトとかベートーベンみたいなクラシックの音楽って もうずっといろんな国でいろんな人が長い歴史の中でいろんな演奏をしていると思いますが、やっぱそれぞれの演奏家によってちょっとずつ解釈が違って表現の仕方も違っているっていうようなニュアンスに近いのかなと僕はちょっとそこは考えていますけど、彼女が今着ているこれはオーガニックコットンで、僕が織ったものなんですけども、それを彼女が自分で天然の藍で染めて、自分でこうデザインして作ったブラウスなんですよ。ちょっと見えるかな。
So this top actually, this fabric is like organic cotton made from Mr. Shimogawa, and I actually dyed it indigo. I dyed it myself, and then I designed it and I actually made it, and it was done yesterday. So
Wow.
Oh, great.
yeah, it's like great to wear it today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
でこれはカスリの柄は入ってない。
Yeah. So this is just no kasuri. It's just like a plain kasuri. But yeah.
だけどもなんかそういうあと天然の藍染めで、僕が職人として僕がその久留米ガスリの製法で、織り上げたオーガニックコットンの、無地を彼女が自分で天然の藍で染めたっていう。そしてそれは来月ですね、ここの、地元の大学で行われるイベントで、ショーで、彼女はそのお披露目するんですね。そういうプレゼンテーションする機会もちゃんと作っているっていうところ、そういうなんていうかな、やっぱ現代風にいろんな取り組みとしてちゃんと、アップデートして伝えていくようなことを、今はすごく小さい規模でやってるかもしれませんが、こういうのをこう広げていくことで久留米ガスの魅力は伝わっていくんじゃないかなと思ってます。
I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but that you're an intern at Shimogawa-san's workshop. Yeah. So that made me think actually, even why am I interested in Ikat and all of this in particular? Because I was formally trained at a design school, and at my design school, there was a lot of attention and emphasis given on preserving traditional crafts and heritage. But if you look at the majority of young people, they are not much in touch with craft traditions or heritage traditions. So perhaps a good way to popularize this might be to get in touch with more art school students and create collaborations in partnership with art schools. Because the students who are there in art and design schools today are going to be tomorrow's creative influencers. So if you plant this little seed of kurume kasuri within different art schools and just ignite this curiosity about this craft in their heads, then perhaps they can take it on themselves and make it their own and interpret it in their own ways. So they sort of become ambassadors for kurume kasuri because of this little curiosity that was triggered in them at the school level itself.
そうですね。僕もそれはすごくそういうふうに思ってます。実際今私たちはここの私たちのエリアにある大学と連携して、自分たちで藍を栽培して、その自分たちで栽培した藍を、将来的には商業化して、これも SDGs とかサステナブルに絡むことでもあるんですが、自分たちの地域で藍を育てて、それで、染色して久留米ガスを作るっていうようなことを、やっていく。もうやっぱり藍っていうのが地元で取れなくなってるんですね。やっぱり今日本では徳島県とか、沖縄とか北海道とかすごく限られた地域でしか藍は栽培されていないんですけれども、江戸時代にオランダにどんどん輸出されていた時のように、この久留米地域でももう一回藍の栽培を復活させようというような取り組みをやってまして、地元の大学生なんかも積極的に参加してくれて、いろいろ取り組んでます。で、その中でそういう大学生が行うちょっとちっちゃなファッションショーなんかにもその藍で染めた ものをデザインしてショーでプレゼンテーションしたりとかっていうことで、まあ、いろんなその可能性を広げていく、まあ、僕らはビジネス的になんかそれでこう成り立つようなことを考えていきたいし、学生にはやっぱそれで学びの機会を持ってもらって、まあ、将来に向けてはそれがなんか自分たちの夢とか希望につながっていけるようなものに、発展してくれたらいいなっていう、そういう。
Yeah, that's a lovely example. That's a lovely project to reinstall the indigo in the local area and really work with the plant from like growing little seeds to harvesting and dyeing. Yeah, we have also in the Netherlands a similar thing where we have the linen project, it's called, where we cultivate flax fibers again, and textile designers and textile crafts people are working with the flax fiber to make linen fabrics in the end. So because the flax fibers or the linen from which we had traditionally here in Holland is also disappeared for the most part. So it's really trying to get Dutch people or Dutch designers connecting with the old traditional Dutch textile heritage again. I have also one collaboration that I would like to mention still. It just popped in my mind, which is really nice. It's a collaboration between kimono designer Hiroko Takahashi and Adidas. Hiroko, she designs this very geometric kimono fabrics in black and white. I think she also translates these traditional Japanese patterns into contemporary graphic and geometric patterns. And her designs are almost always in black and white and very graphic. And she now has a collaboration with Adidas to, I think, for shoes, but also kimono. And I think they even have a pop-up shop in London at the moment. So it's also a nice example to explore and maybe get some inspiration from that.
高橋ひろ子さんのは僕もちょっと見たことはありますけども、すごく、なんか興味深い取り組みだなと思ってますし、まあイメージ的にはなんかまあちょっとそういう表現の仕方というかですね、なんだろう。まあちょっとまあもちろん僕は僕なりのオリジナルでやっていきたいと思いますが、まあこういうプレゼンテーションとかそういうポップアップショップみたいなのをちょっと僕もまあそういうまあロンドンとかアムステルダムとかヨーロッパの方でもちょっとできるようになったらすごくいいなと思ってます。
So I'll talk about this in two parts. The first part is the work that we did under Ikat last year. And one particular project that might be relevant in terms of creating new patterns is this data visualization project done by Komal, Mike, and Natasha, who were part of the Ikat team. So what they did was they tried to look at how we can integrate data visualization into Ikat patterns. And for example, in this slide, you can see in this motif, the square motif, the size of the square represents the income of the weavers, and the color of the square represents whether they are urban weavers or rural weavers. So the larger the square, the higher their income. And when you take actual data points and when you plot it during this, using this pattern on a large scale, you instantly start to see patterns actually in the data that start emerging. So we can see that although the purple squares, which are the urban weavers, they are very few in number, but most of them have a very large square, which means that the urban weavers earn significantly higher. And whereas the brown squares, they are much higher in number, most of them have a very small white square at the center, which means that even though the rural weavers are much larger in number, their income is still very low. So in this way, using data visualization might give us a platform to think about what messages can we communicate through these patterns on the textile. And in this way, the pattern on the textile isn't just decorative anymore. It actually has a message behind it. And this also reminds me of this project by the designer Giorgia Lupi, who took data visualization about different issues, such as climate change, or income disparity between genders. And she used it to design apparel. So we can see that this sort of usage of data visualization in Kurume Kasuri might allow us to reflect on, okay, what are the issues affecting Netherlands? What are the issues affecting Japan? What are the issues affecting the world? And see what kind of powerful data might we tap into and use it to create patterns that we can use on the Kurume Kasuri products. Now, it must be said that this approach, it isn't immediately perceptible. Like, if you see someone in the street wearing a data visualization based pattern, you might not immediately realize what the data visualization is about. But it adds a story to the apparel. There is a story you can tell about what this fabric, where this fabric comes from, what is the origin of this pattern, and that story adds a new kind of value to the product. Secondly, I'd like to talk about some of the work I've done in relation to Ikat in India. So I worked with a particular type of double Ikat called patola, which is practiced in the Gujarat region of India. And it's very interesting how Shimogawa-san mentioned the different stories behind the patterns, because I did this sort of study of the different classifications. There is a classification that exists that organizes the different kinds of pattern by whether it's based on nature, whether it's geometric. And then I also collected the stories that go behind the pattern, because each of the pattern has a story behind it. There is this one particular pattern called chabdi, which in Gujarati means basket. And this actually is an abstraction of a fertility ritual that used to be practiced, where there was a basket of flowers that was given to a bride as a gift. And so there are numerous stories behind every pattern, which can be very interesting in terms of how to develop these patterns further. So this is the basket of flowers motif. So on the left, you see the original picture of the pattern. And what I did was, as I documented these patterns, I started digitizing them. I started recreating them digitally. And it made me realize that the modularity of these patterns lend themselves so well to animation. So then I started creating animations out of these patterns that it instantly gave them a new level of I don't know, liveliness. And I started imagining that perhaps these animated motifs could be, maybe you could create GIF stickers out of them that you could use on social media. And in this way, animating these patterns can contribute to the sort of hype that might be needed to raise the awareness about these craft heritage amongst young people. So these are some other examples of the patterns that I animated. And I think it's a great potential to be taken advantage of, because it'll allow us to create new kind of visual touch points based off this traditional media and use it in a digital context. So yeah, that is the Pixel Patola project. And then there was another particular project that we did called Orikat, which basically involved creating this new kind of QR code scheme for Ikat fabrics. But I think I'll talk about this part during the cultural identity part, because maybe it's more relevant there. So yeah.
Yeah, very nice. What you said about the data visualization patterns. And yeah, I think that is really nice. And of course, as you said, it's not immediately recognizable as such, but it has a very deeper layer into the design and tells a great story. And I think all the traditional Kurume Kasuri patterns are also very symbolic. They all represent something, whether it's a feeling or emotion or a season or a plant or something like that. And of course, we might not immediately recognize those symbolism, that symbolism in the pattern. So I think that's something that we could use. And I also think it's funny because it's also kind of the way that I personally work with my own work. For example, I have dyed textiles with bacteria that produce pigment, and those bacteria leave growth patterns on the fabric. And it kind of looks like tie-dye, but it isn't. And of course, when you see the patterns and when you see the fabric, you don't know that these patterns are made by bacteria. But then when you tell the story around it, then it really starts to,
I think
alive.
That mystique that it adds to the object is valuable in itself. It adds a sort of enigma to the product, which I think is it's very marketable, at least in a way.
Yeah, definitely. It really helps to sell the product or tell the story. Yeah,
totally agree with you.
And also with the Pixel Patola project, making these animated GIFs of the designs. That's also something how I present my own work on my website. So that's funny.
Oh, okay, great. Wow. I'll check that out. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, we could talk about that also.
Yeah, it's a really nice idea.
僕もすごくちょっと興味深いなと思いました。柄を、なんだろう、まあ、確かに僕たちも久留米がすりの模様っていうのはいろんな、まあ、さっきも言いましたけども、割とそういう幸運の、なんて言ったらいいですか、まあ、幸運をもたらす意味があるような縁起物とか、お守り、身を守るっていうような意味合いで、日本では使われていることが多いです。それで、なんか社会問題とかを柄に乗せて表現するっていうのは、僕たちの久留米がすりの職人の中ではあまり使われないロジックだと思うので、まあそういう意味ではなんかコラボレート、まさにコラボレートするなんか意味がそこに価値があるなとちょっと感じました。
I have also I came across a pattern of Kasuri fabric. Which is like made of all these kind of tiny dots and stripes, which really reminded me of code language. And I thought maybe we could also create some visual code language in the fabric that tells the story of Kasuri. For example, how much every step takes in the process, how much time it takes, or something like that.
もう一つかすりの柄をまあ、そういうデジタル化してアニメーションにして、必ずしもそういうテキスタイルにするんじゃなくてかすりの模様をなんか別のものに転化させて、なんか、まあ、なんていうかな、まあ、展開していくっていうかですね、なんか、まあ、ビジネス的ななんかつながりを作っていくっていうものはですね、僕は個人的には賛成です。これについては多分職人の立場ではいろんな意見の人がいらっしゃるかもしれない。例えばもうやっぱりあくまでも久留米がすりっていうのは織物なのでテキスタイルとして表現することに意味があるっていう考えの職人さんもいるかもしれないです。だけど僕はですね、やっぱり続けていくことが大事だと思っていて、現代にアップデートさせて、やっぱり現代風に再解釈していくことっていうのはいろんな表現の仕方を多様化していくっていうところに一つはやっぱりなんか大事な要素があると思っているので、まあ、そういう点ではですね、必ずしもテキスタイルと表現していくだけではなく、そういうデジタルツールを使って別の表現の仕方があるっていうのは僕は全然それについて肯定的な意見だし、何を残すのか何を伝えていくのかっていうところがですね、ちゃんと、しっかりと芯がぶれていなければ僕は、すごく表現の幅に広がりを持たせるのはすごく自由だと思ってますし、まあ、一番最後ローラが言われたようななんかかすりのパターンがなんかコードに似ているっていう風な意見に対してもなんだろう そういう意味を持たせて、そのパターンをちょっとまた再構築するっていうことで、なんか伝統的な、そういう模様っていうのを生かしつつも、なんか新しい現代風のものに再解釈するっていうような表現に、たどり着けるんじゃないかなとちょっと思いました。
Yeah, I totally agree with Shimogawa-san that any sort of digital output like this, it's secondary. The fundamental primary thing is the Ikat product itself, because if what gives it value is the tedious process of dyeing the warp and the weft, and that's what adds value to the product. But any digital output sort of like this, it just adds light. It's showcases the value of the product. So its purpose is only to showcase the value of the original. So yeah, I agree with Shimogawa-san.
Yeah, and if you were talking like maybe if you would make an iPhone case, for example, you know,
Yeah.
then you could also, along with the iPhone case, create a GIF as a screensaver for the iPhone itself. So then you have like two products that really complement each other and help to create the story.
And you connect the digital world and the physical world through this common medium of the patterns, while promoting Kurume Kasuri, the product in themselves. So yeah.
はい、ありがとうございます。いろんなちょっと意見が出てすごくなんか、興味深いなと思いました。いろんな、その僕も必ずしもやっぱりその織物だけじゃなくて、やっぱそういう続けていくためにやっぱその商業的な部分の成功っていうのがやっぱどうしても、必要になってくるので、そういう点でもいろんなデジタルツールを生かしていろんな展開をしていくっていうのに関してはすごくやっぱりなんか興味深いし、なんか可能性広まるなという、そういうふうに僕も思ってます。
Traditionally, here in the Netherlands, Delft blue was very popular. Delft blue was also a technique that came from Japan and China of creating porcelain that was dyed or painted with blue motifs and blue designs. And then like the Dutch people kind of, they started like replicating those techniques here in the Netherlands because it was cheaper than to import it from China. And then now it is seen after all those years, it is seen as something that's typically Dutch. If tourists come to the Netherlands, for example, they think of windmills, cheese, tulips, but also of the Delft blue tiles and Delft blue porcelain and ceramics. And now also younger people are trying to reinterpret this Delft blue to become more contemporary and more modern, because young people see Delft blue as very traditional and a little bit like it's something for your grandmother and not something you would like in your house, for example, you know. So, and it's very interesting to see what designers are doing with this Delft blue technique and translating it to very contemporary products. For example, Olivier van Herpt, he was doing it with 3D printing ceramics and adding blue color to create a new kind of Delft blue. And also Tim van Leer, also a designer, he also reinvented Delft blue in very contemporary modern ceramics. So those are just the examples how a super traditional technique can like evolve with the times and still be relevant today, and also appeal to a younger audience.
いや、興味深いと思います。やっぱりなんか一つのなんかそういうコラボレーションの成功事例だと思いますし、なんかそういういろんな交流の歴史とかそういうものの上にやっぱこういうのも成り立っているなっていうのもちょっと感じますし、こういうことをちょっと久留米がすりでなんか表現できたらいいなっていうところをすごく思ってます。
Yeah, I think from a business perspective, I remember Shimogawa-san had commented that business relationship is not just about creating and selling a product. It's more than that. And I think with this collaboration, the advantage that we have is that we have this opportunity of creating a story around the Kurume Kasuri products and the Kurume Kasuri brand, and actually marketing the story, which captures the rich heritage of the Kurume Kasuri craft and the integration of Dutch design into it. Because by themselves, these two design movements are popular and have a rich history behind them. But when you combine these two of them, you get the best of both worlds. And yeah, so I think it's the combination of these two ideas is what is very powerful. Because what this collaboration would do is it would, given that these Kurume Kasuri and Dutch design come from two entirely different continents, it really enlarges the audience that you're going to be talking to. Because the fact that such distant cultures can come together and create something that is synthetic, that is a synthesis of very interesting and historical ideas, I think it will speak to a global audience. So that is something we need to consider. How do we retain the cultural identity of Kurume Kasuri and Dutch design while still talking to a global audience?
アジテッシュさんが言ったように、やっぱりその、必ずしもそのクルメガスリっていうのがテキスタイルであるっていうのが絶対条件なのかっていうふうに捉えずにですね、いろんな、価値、いろんな要素っていうのを組み込んで、やっていくっていうところがすごくやっぱり、アジテッシュさんはそのストーリーっていう言葉でそれを表現されたとは思いますけれども、やっぱりクルメガスのその、魅力とか価値っていうのを伝えることそのものにもやっぱなんかビジネス、なんて言うんだろう、ビジネス的なその意味を持たせるようなこともできるのかなと思ってますし、やっぱりそのクルメガスリのように伝統工芸っていうものはやっぱり一つのコンパクトなエリアでものづくりが完結するっていう意味で、やっぱりその SDGs とかサステナブルっていうのにすごくこう、なものづくりができているっていうふうに言われてます。でやっぱこれ今のファッション業界とかテキスタイル業界でもすごく SDGs とかサステナブルっていう問題に対してすごく世界中でいろいろと取り組みが今進んでいるところなんですけども、そういった意味で僕らが作っているような織物っていうのはそういうSDGs サステナブルっていうような取り組みにすごくやっぱり基づいてやっているので、そういう作りすぎないっていう考えからにおいてもやっぱりそのストーリーとか価値っていうものになんかなんていうんですかね、そういうなんかビジネス的ななんかアイデアを見つけることでですね、本当に必要な分だけを作って、あとはそのストーリーとして伝えていくっていうような循環で、ものづくりができたら一番いいなと思ってます。
Yeah, taking off on the sustainability aspect of the product, I was thinking, so Kurume Kasuri fabrics are known for lasting very long. And I think in Japan in general, there is a culture of appreciating daily objects and using them for the longest time as possible. So that made me think there might even be a potential idea of creating products out of recycled Kurume Kasuri. Like maybe that could be a potential thing. You could make quilts out of Kurume Kasuri, and just, I think in a way, the recycling idea might very well convey the sustainability aspect of the project, as well as also in terms of cost effectiveness, it might be interesting to look at a recycling sort of idea. And another thing I was thinking about is, given the pandemic that we're living in and also climate change, another issue from a business perspective we might need to tackle is how do we how do we come up with ways of allowing remote collaboration between, say, Japanese artisans and Dutch designers? Because the way we did things in the past by making people travel halfway across the world in planes, it's not very justifiable from an environment point of view. So how can we leverage the new tools and digital platforms that we have in order to facilitate this collaboration? Like, is there a way of, I don't know, communicating new pattern designs or creating a sort of platform that allows artisans and designers to share pattern designs on a common digital platform? So I think if we investigate into these issues of sustainability and collaboration in times of climate change, then these constraints might lead us to some interesting solutions.
はい、ありがとうございます。そうですね。やっぱりやっぱり今からその地球環境問題っていうのがやっぱすごく大事になってくるので、作ることだけが、伝統工芸を残すことだけではないっていう、そこはやっぱりすごく大事な要素なのかなと認識してます。
Yeah. And I think that might be another marketable aspect as well, that when we're talking about Kasuri, we're not just talking about the Kurume Kasuri products, but we're also talking about sort of ecological lifestyle that goes with it, that we should not keep buying products continuously. We should use products for as long as possible, because Kurume Kasuri's strong connection to Japanese culture will also allow us to tell us the story that this is a sort of product that you buy once and it will last with you for a long time, thereby reducing your impact on the environment. So yeah, it's along with the product, we can talk about the culture. We can actually introduce the audience to the whole culture that goes with it.
Yes, and of course, Japan has also very nice mending techniques in textiles.
Yes.
So that's also something that you can add to the story and to the product, and how people can take care of their products if they might break or something like that. And that mending techniques are very beautiful, and it helps to personalize the products too.
Yeah, and this discussion actually just reminds me of this trend. So there's this aesthetic on TikTok called cottagecore aesthetic, and I can see, because Laura mentioned the mending culture in Japan, so it just made me think that if we sort of create short videos, like short instructional videos of about using these mending techniques that can be in the format of a short TikTok video, and if we collaborate with certain TikTok or social media influencers, this can be a great way to promote the culture that goes with the product. So I think, yeah, this has a very great potential for holistic promotion from all points of view.
なんかサシコは結構オランダの方でもなんかちょっとこうなんか人気があるっていうか、関心持ってる人が結構いらっしゃるなっていう印象を僕も持ってます。
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because we're also, of course, when sustainability comes to mind, thinking about how we can elongate the use of a product. And I've also experimented a bit with the Sashiko stitching technique. I mean, of course, in denim, it's used a lot. But yeah, you can use it to any product that's broken or teared.
そうですね。サシコはやっぱり歴史的なところを紐解いていくと、やっぱりそういう本当に日本のもったいない精神がデザインとうまくこうなんていうんだろう、融合して生かされている代表的なものの一つだと思いますね。あとはもうそのステッチ、サシコのステッチっていうのはやっぱそのアイデンティティですね。やっぱそのステッチがその作った人の個性だったり。どういうエリアで作られているものかっていうのが結構その、ステッチのパターンとかで特徴が出たりするので、なんかそういうサシコの、柄とかステッチのパターンにはすごくアイデンティティがあって、それも すごく面白いところだと思います。
And I think what I don't know if it's true, but what I've been told is that the Sashiko stitching technique with the white thread, the stitches are like the size of a rice grain. So it also has symbolism again, and also the stitching symbols that are used are maybe also the same symbols that are woven into Kasuri fabrics. I don't know.
そういうものもあるでしょうね。全部じゃないとは思いますけども、多分そういう、なんだろう、地域によってそういう風にそういう意味合いを持たせて作られているものもあると思います。でもう一つはよく日本ではこれは刺し子のステッチ以外にも他の伝統的な染め物とか織物とかにも見られる特徴の一つとして柄の持つ意味としてはやっぱり自分のなんだろう所属先っていうか、どこの町の人間とか自分がどこの人間かっていうのが分かる証明書、身分証明書の役割をしてたんです、昔は。昔 ID カードとかがなかったので、自分の着ている刺し子のステッチとか織物の模様とかが自分の ID カードの役割をしていて、例えば山で遭難したり事故で、行方不明になった時にその着ている服でどこの人なのかっていうのがそれで見分けがついたっていうのもすごく興味深いところです。
Yeah, super interesting. I didn't know that.
No, I didn't know
Very
that.
nice. Yeah. Also kind of data visualization in a way. Yeah. Yeah.
So this was one of the projects that we did under Digikat called Orikat. And Orikat, the word actually, it comes from optical recognition enabled Ikat. So we try to conceptualize that, for example, even in the case of Kurume Kasuri, one of the greatest source of value for Kurume Kasuri is the fact that it has been handcrafted by artisans who are in a line of a centuries-long tradition. The identity of the artisans and the weavers in Kurume is the identity of the craft itself. So is there a way we can embed this identity into the products themselves? So we imagined this new take on the QR code or the barcode, which at a prototype stage, it looked sort of like this, where it is a border. It is a border pattern that can be added to the whole length of a fabric, and it's a repeating pattern. And as you can see in this proposed diagram, that there will be two lines that define the boundary of the code. And within the different, so it's sort of like a modified barcode, but with much thicker lines to make it a little more aesthetic. And within this, perhaps you could embed information like the geographic origin of the product, who the creator is, how long the product took to be made, and perhaps the story behind the motif used in the product. And what this does is it instantly adds value in the product for the weaver as well as the buyer, because the weaver can be assured of having his identity being intact and embedded in the product, and the buyer knows that this is an authentic product. And especially recently we have seen the rise of NFT in digital culture, which shows that people still value this notion of authenticity behind a product. So Orikat, it actually taps into both these ideas of authenticity of a product as well as innovative pattern making, adding innovation to the pattern design itself. So in this, you can see an example of how, say you have the pattern embedded on the border of a fabric somewhere. You could possibly scan it with your phone, and the Orikat app would instantly identify using the pattern where the product comes from, who the creator is. And yeah, this can really extend the potential for pattern making and the things you could do with Orikat. And as you can see in these mock-ups that we made, You can perhaps put the Orikat pattern on a collar or on the border of a mask. So the horizontal nature of it makes it so that the weaver can still have his original pattern. Like 90% of the product can be whatever the weaver has imagined. And there will just be a tiny portion that seamlessly fits into the product while still being aesthetically pleasant. And yeah, so this in a way would make whoever buys an authentic Kurume Kasuri product knows exactly which weaver made it from which part of Kurume. And in this way, I think it really responds to this issue of preserving cultural identity in a product that becomes global.
Yes, I think this is a super beautiful example what you can do with digitalization in traditional products. And one of the biggest things also in sustainability is traceability. Where does something come from, you know, where do the fibers come from, where does the dye come from? And this is a perfect way to make everything completely traceable also.
Exactly. The consumer is aware of where the product comes from, and in this way, it totally responds to the sustainability aspect as well by being traceable.
Yes, you mentioned something like NFT in digital culture. What does it mean?
So NFT is actually so recently a lot of artists have started selling what is called NFT works online. And NFT is basically a way of encoding an artwork in such a way that it guarantees that it is an original creation made by someone. It's sort of like a security code, which guarantees the authenticity of the work. And recently it has become very popular. And maybe this just points to the fact that people do value authentic pieces. People are still interested in things that are not just mass produced, but are custom made. And I think this fits in very well with Kurume Kasuri because every Kurume Kasuri is made by one artisan or a team of artisans in a particular workshop somewhere. And I think promoting this fact that this has not been factory made or made by an anonymous machine, that it is handcrafted, that is a very marketable selling point.
Yes, definitely.
なんかサシコの話からなんかこっちに移って、これもやっぱそのアイデンティティの、そういう表現の仕方というのがですね、すごくなんか、わかりやすかったです。自分のその身につけている服だったりとかにそういうものが確かにあるとですね、なんか、その洋服そのものにもちろん愛着は湧くと思うし、やっぱこういう表現の仕方っていうのもなんかすごくあるんだなっていうのがですね、ちょっとすごくなんかちょっと興味深くちょっと聞かせてもらいました。なんか可能性があるならなんかそういうやっぱ具体的なですね、かすりの表現の方法として、僕たちが持つ製法の中でなんかこう実際プロダクトしていく方法をなんかいろいろと具体的に探っていくのっていうのも面白いなと思います。
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with the beauty with these QR codes and stuff is that you can keep updating the information you want to show. Correct?
Yeah, in the back end, there is a possibility of updating. It depends on what kind of codes you use. I think with barcodes it's not possible, but with QR code it depends on what kind of code you're using. But yeah, there is a possibility of doing that, I think.
Yeah. So you might also maybe, you know, if you you could also maybe add the data of the buyer into it if you can update it. So then if you can hand it down generations and you can also see who previously owned the product.
Yeah, totally. The Orikat idea was actually inspired from this tradition in India where there are certain Ikat fabrics that are super expensive And they are actually bought as family heirlooms and are passed down from mother to daughter. And there is a whole record of who has owned the product throughout its history. And this also fits in with the concept of blockchain on the internet, because blockchain is basically a record of who has owned a certain product across time. So yeah, adding the information of the buyer, I think, yeah, that's just adds even more value to the traceable aspect. And it gives a sense of ownership to the buyer, that he's part of something valuable.
Yeah, definitely.
なんかやっぱそういう、いつの時代もやっぱそういう自分のアイデンティティっていうかですね、生きた証っていうものを、やっぱり残すっていうのは人間の本能だと思うんですね。で、やっぱり昔から世界各地いろんな、それぞれの国に例えば民族衣装っていうのがやっぱあると思うんですけど、まあ日本ではその着物っていうのが日本人の、そういうトラディショナルな服装ではありますけれども、まあ、それに加えてこういうデジタルでそのパーソナルな要素をデザインに取り込むっていうことで、なんかよりなんかそういう自分のアイデンティティというか、そういうものの価値が深まるのかなっていうふうに感じます。
So one of the ways in which you can take cultural identity, because when you're taking something like Kurume Kasuri and you're expanding it and you're communicating it to such a wide audience, you need to figure out a way of communicating the cultural identity while still talking to a very diverse audience. And one of the most efficient ways of doing of communicating this cultural identity is by translating it into a brand identity. And I thought it might be interesting to look at certain examples of how some brands have managed to do this in their products. The first brand that I'd like to talk about is Product Red. So Product Red is an organization whose mission is to fight against pandemics like the AIDS pandemic and COVID. So they're a non-profit organization who exists for this mission. And what their strategy has been to communicate this mission is by partnering with various brands and creating special edition products that are branded Product Red. So in these products, what you'll often find is that they are in this very particular iconic red color. That is the Product Red brand color. And they will also create this sort of modified logo, wherein they'll take these brackets and they'll put the partner brand's logo inside the bracket, and there will be the word red on top in the index position. And what this creates is first of all, this expands their potential for the range of products that they can create, because they can create apparel and consumer products to etc. A whole different range of stuff. And this also gives them visibility by tapping into the audience of the existing brands. And by doing this over the course of many years, they have managed to build an association between Product Red and fighting against pandemics. So in this way, they have really managed to create the strong brand association between these visual elements like the red color, the brackets, the red. They've condensed down to certain elements that they can use to talk about themselves and associated it with a mission. Another very iconic example, I think, would be this collaboration between Marimekko and Adidas. Marimekko, as we know, has become very well known for its iconic wavy organic patterns of these overlapping shapes. And what this has allowed them to do is collaborate with brands like Adidas and create products that are very innovative in their application, but are still identifiable as Marimekko products. So again, as we discussed earlier, that perhaps we need to find this set of visual elements and patterns that we can define as being the Kurume Kasuri patterns and use them in products. And another thing that might help is, because a brand cannot be conveyed just through patterns itself. You need a whole universe around it. For example, you might need a name. So can we come up with a naming idea that makes Kurume Kasuri a very catchy brand name? For example, Marimekko, it's a quirky word. It's not a general descriptive word. but still this word has managed to create an association with finished design. So in this way, can we come up with a name that is strongly associated with the Kurume Kasuri tradition, a color palette, and a tone of voice? Shimogawa-san mentioned earlier how we need to think about how we tell the story of Kurume Kasuri. So the how part of it would involve what does the art direction of the photos look like? How do we position the products? Do we showcase the products in an environment? Do we showcase them in an isolated white background like they've done here? So all these kind of art direction choices will contribute in making this cohesive brand that is identifiable across different target audiences and across a different range of products. So I think it's a matter of really looking into and examining all the elements we have at our disposal in the Kurume Kasuri craft and picking and curating these set of elements in order to create different brand assets like patterns, colors, name, tone of voice, and any other elements that it might inspire us. And another very interesting project that I would like to talk about is I came across this project called Sido Hotai by Studio Eretris. And what they did in this project is they created a brand for this material called Hotai. And so it is a material, it's a very breathable material from Japan. And they took advantage of this striped visual appearance of the fabric. And they also referenced the stripes and wavy patterns in Japanese rock gardens. And they used it to create these sort of letters that abstract this striped visual style. And they turned it into brand elements that they can use across different products. So you can see how they took advantage of this striped visual element and they used it to make stickers that show the origin. And they also use it to make different kinds of pictograms, as well as a sort of brand monogram in this form of this multi-line etch. So by condensing down, by finding this essence of Hotai in the form of the striped visual element, they managed to create a very strong brand that can be used across different media, whether it's pictograms or the monogram, the etched monogram, or a sticker, etc. So I think this is a very relevant example that might help us in figuring out what is the essence of the Kurume Kasuri brand that we can use and then extrapolate to all these different brand elements to create something very identifiable.
Very good example, last one. Like it.
私が今着てるですね、この柄が、さっき言ったように七宝柄といって、日本の伝統的な模様の一つっていうふうに、お伝えしましたが、私のこの会社ですね、マイカンパニー下川織物の、ロゴマークになってます。で、このロゴマークの中には、私の会社としての企業理念とかいろんな思いが、詰まってますし、七宝っていう柄そのものが本来持つ意味と、私たち下川織物がこの久留米gasuriを通して、世の中に貢献していきたいことっていうのがすごく同じ一致している部分が多いので、この柄をすごく私とこの会社は代表的な柄の一つとして作っているんですが、この柄を使ってなんかいろんなコラボレーション展開をしたいなっていうのは実は前々から思っていることです。はい。
That's great that Shimogawa-san is already that your brand is already in the right direction in terms of taking something traditional in the form of this pattern itself and using it as your logo. Yeah, I think if we further investigate in the same direction, I think, there's a potential to create a great brand.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great starting point.
そうですね。この七宝柄でなんかいろんな方とコラボレーションしたいっていうのはすごく もう前々から思ってますし、国内では少しそういう事例も少しはありますけれども、なんかやっぱりそのオランダだったりとか、やっぱ世界に向けてなんか広げていきたいと思っているので、そういうのに興味持っていただいている方と、興味も持っていただける方と、ぜひなんかいろいろプロダクトの可能性について話したいと、もう常々思ってます。
Oh wow, I'm very honored to know that. Yeah, I'll be really glad to work on this. Work on this collaboration and look into what we can do with this pattern and perhaps how I could reinterpret it from my graphic design perspective. And yeah, I think there's lots of potential things that we can extract out of this pattern. Yeah, so I'm really enthusiastic for it.
この柄はもう僕のすごいパッションがすごく詰まってますので。
Yeah, I think it might be great to see how we can, I don't know, perhaps create even copywriting around it, or how can we modify the pattern for the digital platform so that we can communicate this passion that Shimogawa-san has for the pattern. Yeah, I think there we have a great potential for a story. And how can we visually tell this story? So I think we have a lot of elements to build upon.
そうですね。やっぱりこの柄にこそやっぱそうですね。私自身だったり私の会社だったりとかいろんなストーリーとかやっぱ思いが一番詰まっている柄だと思っているので、やっぱまずはこの柄から何かプロダクトを作りたいっていう気持ちはあります。
Yeah, I think the idea of memory and nostalgia, those are very good keywords to have as brand values, and see what sort of why can we look at different territories that convey this idea of memory, nostalgia. And yeah, I think we are closing in upon like a very interesting brand territory.
Yeah, my logo of my studio is called Kuka, and Kuka means blossom or flower in Finnish language. And it's not because I have a Finnish background or Finnish roots or anything, but I really like the language. And I like the way the word looks and the word sounds. And also blooms and blossoms has something personal in me as well. It's very nostalgic for me. Because I really like spring. It's my favorite season. And what I particularly liked in spring are the cherry blossoms. And that's also very Japanese, of course. But when I grew up, we had a big cherry tree in our garden, and it would bloom in spring, and it would be so beautiful. And I would climb in the tree and I would sit in there, and it made me feel very at peace and very, full of joy. And so that's very personal to me as well. And the way I built my logo has some symbolism in it as well. The way the letters are placed together, it makes these kind of pause and play and rewind and forward symbols in it, coming from music. And that's also very personal for me too. So I really can relate to having a pattern or including that pattern in a logo and to make it very personal. So I think that's a beautiful story and a great starting point to use that pattern to create product line or a brand even. And maybe we can also find some overlaps with the pattern, that maybe we can find some Dutch patterns that kind of similar, or
or it's interesting you brought up the fact that the word kuka, you like the meaning behind it, but also the way it looks. So that's the power of a logo and graphic design, actually, because it works on two levels. It works on the phonetic level and the meaning behind it, but also on a purely visual level. So for example, I just saw your logo in the word kuka. It's very pleasing how the word K repeats, and you have this angle that is repetitive combined with the round forms of the letter U and A. So in this way, the hard angles are balanced by the round forms of the U and A. So even that could be a very interesting sort of constraint we can, or question we can ask ourselves. what is a word that can, through its visual forms, can communicate this idea of memory and nostalgia. And yeah, so yeah, I resonate with that approach of looking at how a word looks visually speaking.
そうですね。なんかローラさんのそのクッカっていうに込めた思いっていうのがなんかちょっと聞けて、今まで何回かズームでこうミーティングさせてもらったけども、なんか今日初めてそのクッカっていうその名前に込められた意味を初めて今日聞きました。なんかすごい嬉しいです。
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to hear.
パッションを感じました。
He felt
Yeah.
passion.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't always come across, but I think if we get more personal, then it really comes out.
Yeah.
And also very nice to hear that you use the pattern in your shirt. That's also your company logo. I didn't know that, so that's also very nice to hear.
はい。
So the phonetic aspect actually made me think about, so the word kasuri, correct me if I'm wrong, it comes from the word kasureru, which means to blur, I think, because when you make the pattern, the edges can get a little blurry sometimes. So even that, if we try to visually replicate this idea of blurriness, like if we create a sort of say a lettering or typography that shows this slight blurriness on the edges, I think that can also be something very remarkable and identifiable. So that whenever say one of our potential audience or consumers sees type that has this slightly blurry aspect to it, it can become the identifying mark of Kasuri products. And it is directly related because it connects to the word kasureru, and it also adds this sort of unique touch. Instead of using very neutral, bland typography, you're using something that's slightly imperfect, slightly blurry, and it creates something very identifiable. So I think the idea of blurriness is something that also we can look into as a potential logo direction.
そのかすれっていうのは、結果的にこれもちょっと見えるかな、ちょっとかすれが見えますかね。
Can you see the haze? The
At
kasureru?
the edges, yeah. The haze of the edges, yeah.
これは結果的に出来上がってくるもので、その最初にパターンを図案を作った時にはもちろんかすれは発生してないんですけど、出来上がった織物に結果としてできてくるっていう部分では、職人でもアンコントロールできないものがかすれっていうのなんですね。だけどもそこのかすれっていうのをですね、単なる偶然出来上がったかすれとして、終わらせるのではなくて、ある程度コントロールしてなんかデザインに生かすっていう考えはとても面白いと思います。
Yeah, talking about the uncontrollable edges, it instantly made me think of the Tate Museum logo and pixel typography by Wim Crowell. And I think there is a way of achieving that unpredictable aspect through digital techniques as well. Like in a typeface, say for example, you're designing a font, there is a way to program this sort of randomness in the design of the letters themselves. And I think having something like a typeface might be very useful in communicating on social media or through digital platforms about the Kasuri products. And yeah, I'm really interested in figuring out if there is a way we can reproduce this unpredictable aspect of Kasuri, in which the haze around the edges, how it's an unplanned haze. Is there a way through, I don't know, maybe perhaps through the processing code or some other kind of program, can we reproduce this haze in a digital format?
そうですね、なんかなんかかすりの技法を使ってやっぱそういう 新しい表現のとしてなんか可能性を探れるようなちょっと印象を持ちました。
Laura, do you have any thoughts on these ideas of haziness and creating typography out of this haziness or other brand elements?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea because it's very much representative of the Kasuri technique, of course, and of Ikat as well. That's really what makes it recognizable as Kasuri, like the haziness. So it wouldn't be Kasuri if it didn't have, if it had perfect lines, then it might as well be any kind of other technique. So that's very recognizable.
インドから琉球王朝時代の交易でインド東南アジアを経由して琉球に入ってきたって言われてるんですけど、沖縄の場合はそれに御絵図帳っていってこの王様に着せるための図案があるんですけど、そこでかなりデザイン化されたというか現在の形の原型なんですけど、
沖縄の伝統的なかすり織物だと昔の女性が生活の中から身近にあるものを柄に模様にして着物に取り入れていったっていうのが代表的なのは爪の形とか爪の形ってただ三日月のような柄とか、あとは鳥とか鳥柄トイグワーっていうツバメをモチーフにしてると思うんですけどだとか、あとはこの握った時のグーの感じの柄だったりだとか、たくさんありますけど、だいたい600、700種類あると言われてるんですけど、代表的なものを組み合わせて創作していってるっていうのが琉球の特徴ですかね。
柄を出すにはやっぱり横にかすりを入れないといけないわけですよね。でこのかすりを入れるためのものは自分たちは種糸というんですけど、その種糸を取っていくわけですよね。でそれが織る時にかすりくくって、染色して白く残ったところがこういった感じの十字の柄になる。
次成形っていう作業があります。でこの成形が反物の長さと幅の糸の本数を揃える作業なので結構もう肝心なところです。
横糸は種糸というのがありますよね。縦がその場合は寸法を作っていくという、こういったのを作ってこれの連続ですから、その時には縦糸貼りますよね。貼って印をつけていく。
横がすりのかすりをくくるときにこのガイドとなる糸 っていう感じですね。くくる糸にですね、その種糸を上から沿わせて、でその印がついてるところをくくっていく作業です。
琉球愛は狐の孫科というものに属しまして、基本的に二年草になります。刈り取ってきた藍葉をどんどん搬入していって、2トンから3トン近くになったら20トンの水を張った層に、漬け込んで、これを腐らせることでインディゴの成分を水に溶かし込んで、この溶かし込んだ水を使ってドライ状態まで持っていきます。AN 字というんですけれども、藍を抜く作業、これが非常に重要で、いつ行うかによって品質が変わってきます。3日後、ないしは4日後、中2日、中3日、石灰を入れて攪拌して沈殿させます。石灰を入れることでアルカリ化するのですが、発酵槽で発酵させた段階では pH が 6.5 から 5.78 ぐらいまで酸性化してまいります。この状態で放置してしまうと、インディゴの成分が腐って破壊されてしまう。それを石灰を入れてアルカリ化することで、インディゴ成分を安定化させる、そして沈殿させるという効果があります。これをずっと濃縮していって、最終的には泥状のものとして出荷をいたします。
琉球藍自体は水には溶けなくて、アルカリの中でしかこのブルーが青が溶け出さないので、それを立てるという言い方をするんですけど、発酵に近いような状態の作り方をするんです。琉球藍を染める場合には白い糸から染めて、うちの甕に入っている琉球藍自体が濃度が濃いので、だいたい8回から10回ですごい濃紺まで染め上げますね。フクギは沖縄の代表的な植物染料なんですけど、家の守り木で、昔は守り木なので染料としては使ってなかったんですけど、最近は剪定された枝とか葉っぱとかでよくフクギ染めをするんですけど、真っ黄色、すごい鮮やかな黄色に染まりますね。染めをする時にはお茶を煎じるように1番だし2番だし3番だし、色が出なくなるまでだいたい5番だしぐらいまで色を抽出するんです。 反物が織り上がった時に織り手さんが織りやすいようにのり付けっていうのを糸にされてるので、それを落とす専門の業者に、湯のし屋さんっていう、洗濯屋さんですねに持って行ってきれいな状態にしてもらうというのが仕上げですね。
インビートゥインブルースの、永原歴です。僕はもともと海陽町というこの、海沿いの町でサーフィンをというスポーツに出会って、でそこから、海を通していろんな、国内外旅してきたんですけども、そこでこう海とか、山川という自然に対するリスペクトとか、その地域を超えたいろんなつながりとか、いろんな出会いに助けられて、でその気持ちが思いが藍染めという地元の文化につながったというか、でそこで僕が好きな海の、ブルーとか藍の植物が生み出すブルーで、海と空のブルー、地球のブルーですね。なんかその人にとって生命にとって大事なそのものっていうのがなんか青でつながって、でインビートゥインブルースっていう名前で、それぞれの価値を、歴史文化を発信する活動をしてます。
こんにちは、ハイカラーハンドワークス庄司拓也です。僕が藍染め始めたきっかけは子供のアトピーがきっかけで、藍に含まれるトリプタンスリンという成分がアトピーの抑制効果があるということで、興味を持ち出しました。で栽培するにあたってやっぱアトピーの、最大の原因となる農薬や化学肥料は僕はどうしても使いたくなかったんで、あと環境にも良いものだけで、自然にある落ち葉とか米屋で出るもみ殻とか米ぬかを使って肥料を作ったり堆肥作ったりして植物性だけで今栽培してます。でこの育った藍も全部自分ですくもにして染料にするんですけど、そこも一切薬品は入れないで、環境にも体にもいい藍染めの染料作りを目指してやっております。はい、ありがとうございます。
イエスカンパニー山本です。マッカって言われてます。天然染色の、藍で、自分も、有機栽培というかをやってて、でやっぱりこういうナチュラルなもので、歴史があって、歴史があるってことは、それに裏付けられてきた人々の、が感じる背景とかそういうものがあったと思うんです。で、こういう天然なナチュラルなものが、世界に広まれば、もう少し住みよい、地球が環境になるんじゃないかなって夢見ながら、藍に携わってます。
終わりました。インディゴドアクインディです。
ほら。
シーズン、藍の種です。これ乾燥した葉っぱ。それを発酵させたすくもですね。で、アク。炭から出た灰と水を混ぜたアクですね。この上澄みを使います。 微生物の餌になるのが日本酒。これは僕たちが自分たちで作っている日本酒ですけども、お酒ですね。これ麦のぬかです。ふすまと言われる。ふすまも餌になります。pHアルカリを上げるときには海灰という、これは貝の殻を燃やして粉にした海灰を使うこともあります。
海水で今から洗います。昔から沖縄の方とかはそうなんですけど、染めた後の生地を海で洗うと生地にいいらしくて、うちも時間がある時はこの前の海で洗ってます。波打ちは
徳島県が、その藍の日本一の、生産地として江戸時代からその文化が今も縮小しながらも残ってて、で栽培からすくも作りまで染色までやられる方が、今も残ってるんですけど、生産地でありその、すくもっていうのは、昔も今も海を越えていろんな県外のいろんな場所に、行っていろんな文化になって織物とかね、Sashikoとかとコラボされて日本各地の伝統文化っていうのにつながってるんですけども、今回その長崎から昔もその貿易世界海外ですねつながりが、久留米がすりっていう、かすりの文化を通じて徳島の藍が世界に昔から渡ってたっていうのを知って、なんかすごいそれは海がつなぐその土地と土地とか人と人のつながりっていうのを改めて知れて、またこれから県内国内だけじゃなくてその世界との愛のつながりっていうのをこれを機に僕も勉強していきたいと思ってます。久留米がすりの皆さんや淡愛の皆さんで、世界各地のオランダやヨーロッパの皆さん、アフリカ、南米、中米、アジア各地で愛でつながる仲間たちと、こうやってこれからも情報共有していけたらなと思うので、ぜひ皆さん、徳島県の愛もよろしくお願いいたします。
はい、皆さんこんにちは。私は日本の久留米がすり職人の京蔵下川です。CCD-NL のかすりプロジェクトの中でプロジェクトパートナーとして参加させていただいています。昨年11月から始まったかすりウェビナーですけども、今回が3回目最後になります。3回目のテーマは未来。久留米がすりを文化遺産、産業遺産として残すのではなくて、生活の中で使い続けることで、職人も商品も、世代交代を繰り返しながら進化し、未来へとつないでいく。日本では伝統工芸というカテゴリーがあります。久留米がすりを中心に日本の伝統工芸を未来につないでいくために、次の世代を担う職人たちがどんなことを考え、どのような取り組みを行っているか、皆さんにご紹介していきます。それと合わせて、久留米がすりを通して、刺激を受け、未来を描いていこうとしている、若者の取り組み、あるいは、オランダのデザイナーの方とのコラボレーションの可能性、さまざまな角度で、久留米がすりの未来予想図を皆さんと共に、
描いていけることを願っています。それでは始めます。
池田かすり工房の、4代目池田大吾です。よろしくお願いいたします。本格的に、かすりの仕事を始めたのは4年前、です、はい。それまでは外に出て社会、一般のサラリーマンとして働いてました。
はい。でも池田君の場合はもうずっとあれやもんね、学生の時から藍染めは手伝いで染めてたけん、もう高校生のぐらいから染めてた。
高校の時はそんなやってなかったです。大学の時ですかね。
だけど実質もう20年ぐらい
関わってはいます。はい。
そういう藍染めそのものはね、やっぱそういうあるよね。
そうですね。
で、池田君はここの4代目の後継ぎということですけども、基本的に藍染めの作業は今もう池田君がほとんど、やってますね。この藍染めのなんか魅力っていうのは何やろかね、やっぱ池田君的に自分で染めてみて。
やっぱりさっき見ていただいたかと思うんですけど、一番最初に白から青に変わる瞬間の、綺麗さみたいな美しさっていうのは、毎回綺麗だなと思いますね。あとはすごく管理が難しくて、今もちょっと調子を落としてるんですけど、気候だったり、あとは自分のその手の加え方だったりっていうことで、非常に気まぐれで、毎日状態が変わるので、その中でもある程度色を注文に合わせていかないといけないっていう難しさですね。その難しいところが面白いところなのかなとは思います。
ということはやっぱそういう久留米がすりの魅力にもそれがつながってるっていうことかな。
そうですね。で同じ柄である程度の単数を仕込んだりするんですけど、やっぱり一旦染める時のその力の入れ方もやっぱり変わってくるし、織る人間ももちろん変わってくるんで、同じ仕込みでも全然違うものができてきたりですね、するっていうのは、今までの大量生産の中でいうとあまり良くないことかもしれないですけど、伝統工芸の久留米がすりって中で考えるとすごくそれが味になっていいのかなと思います。
なるほど。やっぱりその藍染めも今藍亀が今何期あったかな今。
今ですね、20あります。
20。一つ一つ個性があるというか、やっぱり色の表情も同じ仕込みしてもやっぱちょっと色の出方が変わったりとか。
全然違います。
じゃあ最後にですね、最後の質問になりますけど、自分自身がこれからかすり職人として、目標というかなんか目指しているところとかがあればちょっと最後に教えてください。
いくつかあるんですけど、個人としては一人前に早くなるっていうことですね。まだまだ修行中ですんで、早く工程全部も覚えないといけないし、でその一つ一つをしっかり極めていかないといけないというのが重要なところかなと思います。でもう一つは、やっぱり産地がかなり縮小しているということで、私が戻ってきて4年経ちますけど、その中でももう廃業されたところが、3件か4件ぐらいあるんですかね。で今20件前後しかない、で父がやってた頃は120、30件残ってた。その頃でもかなり少なくなってて減少してる、これはまずいぞっていう中でやってたみたいなんですけども、これ以上産地が縮小してしまうと、分業してもらってるくくり屋さんだったり、絵を描くデザイナーさんだったりですね、他のお仕事をされてる方っていうのも、成り立たなくなっている。そうなるともう産地として生き残れなくなってくるんで、この、果樹、産地 織元の数を維持するっていうよりも増やしていくようななんかことをやりたいな、ちゃんと儲かる仕組みができて、で、そしたら私もやりたいなとかっていう方が増えてくるんじゃないかなと思うので、まずは自分がしっかり成功するっていうことを見せてですね、でちゃんとそれを外に発信して後に続く人たちを、作っていくっていうのが自分の役目なのかなと思ってます。
はい、いいですか。
はい、
はい、じゃあありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。
はい、ここからはですね、下川織物インターンレポートということで、ご紹介します。かすりの未来を担う若者、久留米がすりを遺産としてではなく生きた産業として継承していくためには、作り手である職人を育成するほかにも、出来上がった生地をデザインして商品にするデザイナー、それからそれを販売する流通業者、セレクトショップなどの小売店の存在というのが必要不可欠になります。そして生活の中でそれを使い続けてくれる、消費者、経済の循環を作り現代にアップデートしながら伝統工芸を未来につないでいくためにさまざまな人々との関係性を構築する必要があると、そういうふうに考えています。下川織物では久留米がすりを学び、将来にわたって関係性を保ち伝えていく役割を担いたいと願う若者を受け入れる取り組みを行ってきています。彼女らが近い将来国際社会の中で久留米がすりと消費者の接点を見出し、久留米がすりの産地に何らかの形で貢献してくれることを願っています。そんな彼女らが久留米がすり下川織物に滞在する中で何を学んでどう感じたのかご紹介したいと思います。それではお二人をご紹介します。じゃあ、Nadia, please introduce yourself.
My name is Nadia Winter. I'm 23 years old and a fashion design student at Burg-Giebichenstein in Halle, that's in Germany. In November 2020, I came to Japan as an exchange student to do one semester in textile arts at Tokyo Geijutsu Daigaku. And yeah, my interest in Japan has been evolving actually already since my childhood, because my dad is very interested in Japanese art and culture, and which he expresses a lot in his work as an architect. So as I started my studies, and I soon realized that in my strictly sustainable working ethics, I often get also inspired by Japanese minimalism. Yeah, so the greater was actually the opportunity I got to come here to Japan and experience it all at first hand. And during my studies at Tokyo Geidai, I realized that the 2 months that I will be here will not be enough to gain everything that I wish to receive here. So I asked around my friends if they knew any atelier or factory that would take in interns. That's how I came across Shimogawa Orimono. Then I emailed him, and it gladly worked all out, even though we're in an epidemic right now. So at the beginning I actually just knew a little about kasuri. I knew that you tie it and dye it before weaving it. I also did a little experiment during my exchange program, but I was not aware how many steps are involved in kasuri production chain until you get this beautiful textile. So I was more than looking forward to learn about this beautiful technique, and especially as a future fashion designer, I think it's very important that every fashion designer knows and experiences every step of the production chain to in order to build up awareness towards the hard work that is put into a single garment.
How are your days at Yame?
So since I got this beautiful opportunity to come here and learn about it, and I have been spending now here for 6 weeks, and since my internship is reaching an end now, I can definitely say that I'm very happy to have extended my stay in Japan here at Shimogawa Orimono. I'm more than grateful for their extraordinary experience they have given me, for their big-hearted hospitality, their acceptance, as well as their boundless openness of sharing their knowledge with me, especially during the times of Corona. Anybody who engages with Kurume Kasuri will soon notice that it takes a lot of experience for comprehension, for the fine sense that is needed, and especially for its perfection. So even though I've gotten the chance to learn a lot and see a lot, I am still at the very beginning of understanding this technique. For some complex production steps, such as the computer system that is needed for tying the yarn before weaving it, before dyeing it, and drawing on the warp before weaving it, the 6 weeks were just not enough to dive deep into those steps. It's also not usual to, for every craftsman besides the factory owners, to be able to do every part of the production. So each of them specifies on one or two and then will become the best at those particular ones. So having this in mind, I think I have been able to gain a rich overview of the production, especially for being a complete beginner in the textile manufacturing, since I am studying fashion design. Like in all crafts, also here rules the motto, learning by watching and doing. And as we all know, that takes time. So I have really developed such a huge appreciation and respect for Kasuri and any other textile, traditional textile that we inherit, and especially those that are made by hand only. Everybody should gain back this knowledge, I think, about this production chain. We have to start valuing the work behind the textiles and the garments. And we should support local businesses to maintain those beautiful traditional traditions and all around the world. So I think we have lost connection towards our textile we have nowadays, and we have to gain those back.
じゃあ last question. What now?
Yeah, what now? That's a good question, since I'm a person that actually rather lives in the moment than planning. But I definitely know when I will be leaving Japan, I'll go back with various knowledges I have gained during my stay here, and I will definitely spread those in my surroundings, wherever I will be. Who knows? But I'm very keen to maintain and support those traditional techniques, crafts, and raise awareness and teaching those to my fellows, my friends, my family, anybody. And yeah, what I think right now, this is the first step we need to take to, against mass production of fast fashion. People have to know about it. They need to learn about every step, and they have to be sensibilized. So in order to them to see the value of the textile and garment, they need to develop some kind of consciousness and about their consumption behavior. So only then people will be willing to pay the rightful price of the product, meaning buy less, choose well, make it last. So yeah, and we cannot rely on government or the companies because unfortunately they always put profit first. So if we as a society show them what we want, what we demand, they will have to adapt to those requirements, of course. And this all has, of course, also have to happen at the same time. So government has to go a step forward. In the same time, we have to show them what we want. So, as said many times before, we all have a choice. So everybody can make a difference, even though it seems so insignificant. But all together we can make a change. But we will have to want to make a change. By interconnecting each other, and teaming up, we'll be very successful, I think. This is why I would love to maintain the relations I have in Japan and collect it all over those 6 months here, because we can all learn from each other in any step we'll take. So with a lot of colorful minds involved, innovative ideas will soon flourish, I think. So we need to shatter this competitive system that is ruling the world right now, and we have to instead work together. And I think also the area around Yame and Kurume is a perfect example, because designers, factories and retailers, they're working very closely together. So they're deeply intertwined, in which they depend on each other but also support each other at the moment. So this mutual support actually lays the groundwork for the survival of the tradition. In terms of Kurume Kasuri, I really hope to be able to establish some cooperation with Kyozo-san in the future. That would be very great. If a suitable project possibility will arise, that will allow this required time and investment, I would be more than happy to work together. So in regard of this, I already had some idea in mind that it would be very interesting for me to start a project that tries to completely ban chemicals during production and drawing back on the primal practices. That doesn't mean that the people around here are not aware of the nature. I think they are very work in its boundaries actually, and try to not harm it in any type. But I think we can all go a step back again, since the industrialization has very changed our life. So this would be a very interesting project I would like to start if possible. But beyond that, I'm very certain that we will stay in close contact and we will benefit from each other. So last but not least, I'm very, very happy and grateful for this experience here. A big thank you goes out from my side to Kyozo Shimogawa, his family, his co-workers, workers, and his friends for giving me this precious memory. I will never forget about it.
I value the preciousness of inherited tradition and passing in it on to the future. I will convey Japanese culture, tradition, and country life. I hope Kurume Kasuri will make people all over the world happy.
Yes.
Arigato.
Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Please continue. This is very impressive, and I'm happy to have been here and met you. Arigato gozaimasu. Mata ne. Very, very soon, hopefully. Please.
わかりました。じゃあそういうことでちょっとここでカメラ切りたいと思います。はい。じゃあこっちが今日はありがとうございました。バイバイ。
Hello, my name is Mana Araki and I go to University of the Arts London. I study BA Fine Art and specialise in drawing.
When I was 11, I decided to complete my secondary education in England. Therefore, I never had a chance to learn or experience Japanese traditional art. However, due to this ongoing pandemic, I came back to Japan last December. As I had some time during the summer holidays, I decided to apply for an internship at Shimogawa Orimono. The reason why I decided to have an internship at Shimogawa Orimono is that living in England for almost half of my life made me realize how precious the Japanese culture is. When I used to live in Tokyo, I never thought about the importance of the Japanese artisan and craftsmanship. However, spending time in the UK guided me to see the beauty of Japanese culture from the outside view. Furthermore, Mr. Shimogawa himself is working with people from overseas, which is a rare sight from Japanese craftsmen, as they normally prefer to keep everything to Japan. This led me to investigate their artisans deeply and wanted to fully immerse myself into the world of kurumekasuri. Japan is a place where many old traditions are protected and still exist in this contemporary world. I was deeply inspired by their beautiful crafts created through many manual processes. As a Japanese, I believe that living and learning in a city with traditional crafts so thriving guided me to express myself through a unique perspective to progress towards developing a consistent personal context to ideas for my future career.
Hi.
Through this internship with Shimogawa Orimono, I obtained inspiration from a variety of galleries, artisans and craftsmanship in Yame and Kurume City. Yame is a beautiful city thriving with many different types of handicrafts, especially kurumekasuri. Shimogawa Orimono specializes in kurumekasuri and has a large facility which allowed interns like me to learn and experience skills to a professional standard. Learning at Shimogawa Orimono led me to immerse myself into a variety of traditional crafts which cannot be learned anywhere else in the world. For example, there was a chance to interview two craftsmen who are essential in making of kurumekasuri, Mr. Ikeda, an indigo dyeing craftsman, and kukuri craftsman, Mr. Uchida. Through interviewing them, I had an opportunity to experience indigo dyeing and was extremely intrigued by the way indigo changed the color from brown to deep blue when oxidized with air. It was also interesting to learn the difference between fabrics, which are chemically dyed and indigo dyed. Although chemically dyeing the fabrics are efficient, the rich color of indigo cannot be gained from other dyeing methods. As well as that, I was able to see where an indigo plant farm was grown and harvested. This farm was very special as normally the indigo plants are only grown in Tokushima Prefecture. However, the community of Kasuri wanted to create fabrics dyed with local indigo and woven in the style of kurumekasuri. Attending a course on sustainability was very valuable and beneficial for me too. I had a chance to learn and become conscious about how the fashion industry is affecting the environment. I believe that this experience was essential for my future. Lastly but not least, I had a chance to learn Kyozo-san's philosophy and what it's like to be craftsman. For my future career, I would like to take Japanese artisans to overseas, especially kurumekasuri. As the cultural capital of the world, I believe that Japan is the center of traditional artisans. Building connections in any creative industry is crucial for many, and I know that this opportunity was what I needed to enhance my confidence and meet people who are actively involved in the contemporary art world. Shimogawa Orimono provided me with expertise and experience in culture that will prove to be very valuable in my future project. This experience was hugely inspirational to me, and I'm hoping that this opportunity will help me to step into the world of traditional Japanese crafts further. I am confident that the skills that I gained will allow me to take the beauty of kurumekasuri outside Japan to the rest of the world.
荒木さんにとって、一生忘れられない体験を得ることができるだろうと思いますし、それをやっぱり今後のですね、人生に生かして、新たな未来を作ってくれるんじゃないかなとすごく僕も、期待しているところですね。ということでですね、荒木さんのインタビューでした。ありがとうございます。いかがでしたでしょうか。さまざまな、プログラム皆さんにご紹介しましたが、最後にですね、私
京蔵下川より皆様へ感謝のメッセージを伝えたいと思います。かすりプロジェクト、過去、現在、未来と3つの時間軸をテーマにお送りしました。かすりは代々職人の手から手へとその技術を受け継がれて、またかすりを愛する人々に語り継がれて、時代をまたいで生き続けてきました。ですが、その技術を受け継ぐ職人は時代が更新されるたびに減少している。これもまた事実です。でもまだ間に合います。私たち、職人は、久留米がすりおよび、世界に点在するかすりが失われないように、歴史の中に埋もれてしまわないようにできることがまだまだたくさんあります。世界中の皆さんとかすりを共有すると同時に、久留米がすりを作る私たち職人はかすりの存在が色あせてしまわないように常に輝き続ける存在でなくてはいけないと考えています。私たち職人がかすりを愛するすべての人たちの希望の光として存在し続けること、これをお約束してこのウェビナーを締めくくりたいと思います。ご清聴ありがとうございました。また、皆さんとどこかでお会いしましょう。Thank you so much. See you again. Bye bye. す。